Hello, this is Mrs. Pickett, and we are going to take notes over lesson 2.5 today. So make sure you either have your notebook handy and ready to copy stuff down, or that you've printed out this sheet from the Canvas page. So this is lesson 2.5, and we are going to talk about absolute value today, all right? So remember, we talked about absolute value a little bit. That's with our two brackets. So make sure the absolute value expression is isolated. Now, hopefully we know what that word means. Isolated means like alone, okay? Think about if someone is isolated, they're all by themselves, okay? If we have absolute value, we're going to set the inside equal to both the positive and negative number from the other side of the equation. So basically that means that you're going to set it equal. You'll have like two answers that you're working with, okay? Because remember, absolute value, and I'm going to show you. So when we do absolute value, and just so we know what we're talking about, I'm actually going to put a heading up here, because we talked about this briefly in Mod 1. So absolute value, that's when you have some number, so I'm going to say x, is inside brackets. And remember, no matter what the number is inside, the answer always has to end up being a positive answer, okay? So, for step 1 then, this is where we're going. We're going to make sure that the absolute value expression is isolated. That means the only thing that can be on the side of the equation is your absolute value. Then whatever is inside your absolute value, so like I'm showing you right here, inside, okay? Whatever's inside, we're going to equal it to both positive and negative numbers. So you'll have to equal it to both the positive and the negative, okay? That's going to be step 2. In a minute, when I do the when I show you the work, it'll probably make more sense. Step 3 will then be to solve. But you're going to solve two equations this time. You're going to solve one that's set equal to the positive number, and you're going to solve one that's set equal to the negative number, okay? Now, this is a little different. You're going to write your answer as a solution set. So that means that x can be equal to, and then you're going to use these little brackets, and you will have two answers in there. The answer you get from your positive one and the answer that you get from your negative one, okay? So you need to remember, just a little note here, you will have two values that x could be equal to, all right? Two values, that's what goes in here. So let's try some examples. So if you're feeling a little confused right now, that is okay. I think once we do the examples, that is going to help. So let's look down here. All right, so I have the absolute value of x is equal to 2. So step 1 is to make sure that absolute value is all by itself. So if we look at this, here's my absolute value. There's nothing else around it, so it is isolated. It's by itself. So now I'm going to set it equal, the stuff that's inside, I'm going to set it equal to the positive and negative number from the other side. So I'm going to take out what's inside, so that's x, and I'm going to set it equal to the positive and negative from the other side. So x can be positive 2, or x can be negative 2. See how I did that? Now this one's pretty easy because once we solve, well, I've already solved. There's nothing else to do. So now I'm going to write my answer. That means x can be, and I'm going to use brackets, either 2 or negative 2. And that would be my answer. So start it off very basic, okay? Same thing if we look at number 2. I'm going to take my absolute value is isolated. It's by itself over here. So I'm going to pull out what's inside, and I'm going to set it equal to the positive of this and the negative. So now here are my two options. M is either going to be positive 14 or negative 14, because, and here's what we can do, we can check our work. If I put positive 14 up here into this problem, the absolute value of 14 is 14. If I put negative 14, so if I use this one up there with M, negative 14, the absolute value is still 14, because remember, absolute value, the answer is always positive. All right, let's try some more. It's starting to get a little more complicated here. So now we're looking, my absolute value is isolated. There's nothing else with it there. I'm going to pull out what's inside, so I have a 5z, and I'm going to set it equal to the positive and negative of this number. So it's going to be equal to positive 40, or 5z will be equal to negative 40, okay? And now we're just going to solve this. So I'm going to divide by 5, and this one, z equals 8, or here, if I divide by 5, z equals negative 8, okay? And so now I'm going to combine it and write it as one answer. So z is equal to 8 or negative 8. See how that works? And if I plug those back in, 5 times 8 is 40. Absolute value of 40 is 40. 5 times negative 8 is negative 40, which is also an absolute value of 40. All right? Let's jump down and look at number 5. Absolute value is still isolated. There's nothing else. It's still there by itself. So I'm going to pull out what is inside. So I have d plus 1. And that's going to be equal to the positive 8. And then I'm going to do a second one. D plus 1 equals negative 8. So you always take whatever's on the other side and do a positive and negative. And now we're going to solve. I have to subtract 1. And so d equals 7. Or over here, I'm going to subtract 1. D equals a negative 9. All right, everyone see that? So now my answer here, D, I'm going to do my brackets, can be either positive 7 or negative 9. Okay? Hopefully this is starting to make sense. Let's jump down and do number 7. All right, so first, there's my absolute value. Nothing else is on this side, just whatever's in my absolute value. So I'm going to pull this out. 4n plus 2. Now it has to be equal to the positive 34. And then we're going to do a separate equation. 4n plus 2 equal to negative 34. Okay? And so now I'm going to solve. It's a two-step equation. I'm going to subtract 2. That's going to give me 4n equals 32. We're going to divide by 4. N equals 8. Now I'm going to come over here, subtract 2. 4n equals a negative 36. Divide by 4. In this case, n equals a negative 9. So then I'm going to combine that and get my final answer. N is equal to, and I'm going to do brackets, 8 or negative 9. Okay? So all of these, the first examples I did, that your absolute value was already isolated. There was nothing else on the side with that one. Okay? So let's go to page 2 of notes so I can show you a little bit.